The diplomatic vessel called Quiet Dawn had been sitting at Station Harmony 7 for 3 days now. For Ambassador, those 3 days were filled with meetings and trade talks and endless documents to review. But for her daughter, those 3 days felt like 3 years of pure boredom. Was only 6 cycles old. By standards, she was still very much a cub. Her fur was soft and silver like moonlight on water, and her large amber eyes seemed to catch and reflect every light around her. She had a small pink nose that twitched when she was curious, and right now, it was twitching a lot. Her mother had given her strict orders before leaving for the morning session. Stay in the quarters. Do not wander. Do not speak to strangers. And most importantly, do not interact with the humans. The humans, her mother had explained, were a young species. They had only joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago, which was nothing in the grand timeline of space-faring civilizations. They were friendly enough, yes. They smiled too much and talked too loud and seemed genuinely excited about everything. But they were also unpredictable, chaotic. They did things that made no logical sense, and this made the older species nervous. Had nodded obediently at all of this. She was a good cub. She followed rules. She understood that her mother's position as ambassador required their family to behave with perfect dignity at all times. But then she heard the laughter. It came floating down the corridor like music from another world. Its large ears rotated toward the sound before she could stop them. They had excellent hearing, and this sound cut through the quiet hum of the space station like a bright light through darkness. They did not laugh, not really. When they were happy, they purred deep in their chests. When they approved of something, they clicked their tongues in a specific pattern. But this sound was different. It rose and fell in waves. It was loud and uncontrolled and somehow warm. It made feel something she could not name. She tried to ignore it. She really did. She picked up her educational tablet and attempted to focus on her lessons about galactic trade routes. But the laughter came again, and this time there were two voices making the sound together. Her pause carried her to the door before her brain could object. The door sensor recognized her biosignature and slid open with a soft hiss, peeked out into the corridor. It was mostly empty. A few maintenance robots rolled past on their quiet wheels. In the distance, she could see a merchant examining his communication device. The laughter came again, louder now. It was coming from somewhere to her left. Knew she should close the door. She knew she should return to her tablet, but her body was already moving, her soft paws making almost no sound on the metal floor. She told herself she would just take a quick look, just a tiny peek. Then she would go right back to her quarters like a good cub. The corridor curved gently, following the outer ring of the station, past several closed doors, storage rooms, technical facilities, a small medical bay. Then she came to a section where the inner wall became transparent, offering a view into a large open room beyond. She stopped, her eyes went wide, her nose twitched faster than ever. Inside the room, two humans were standing at a long metal counter. The counter was covered in something white and powdery. The white substance was everywhere. It dusted the counter like snow. It floated in the air like tiny clouds. It covered the two humans from head to toe. The female human had dark hair pulled back in a messy style. She wore a simple shirt that might have once been blue, but was now mostly white with powder. She was holding something round and soft-looking in her hands. Her face was bright with that strange human expression that had learned was called a smile. The male human was taller. He had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he made the laughing sound. His hair was short and neat, though now it was dusted with white like he had aged 50 years in an instant. He was gesturing wildly with his hands, explaining something that made the female laugh even harder. Then something happened that made gasp. The female human picked up a handful of the white powder and threw it directly at the male's face. Pressed herself against the transparent wall, her heart racing. This was violence. This had to be violence. Should she call for security? Should she run back to her quarters and alert her mother? The took assault very seriously. Even minor physical altercations between species could cause diplomatic incidents that took years to resolve. But then the male human made that laughing sound again. He reached into a large bowl on the counter and grabbed his own handful of white powder. He threw it back at the female. It exploded against her shoulder in a beautiful white cloud. They were both laughing now, laughing so hard that they had to hold onto the counter for support, laughing until their eyes leaked water, which new humans did when they experienced strong emotions. This was not violence, this was something else, something had no word for. She watched as they returned to whatever task they had been doing before. The female began pressing and folding the soft round thing. The male added more powder to the counter. They talked in voices too quiet for to hear through the wall, but she could see their smiles, their easy movements, the way they bumped shoulders occasionally in a gesture that seemed affectionate. The room smelled like something. Even through the ventilation system, even through the corridor's recycled air, caught hints of a scent she had never encountered before. It was warm and sweet and somehow comforting. It made her think of safety and home and happiness, even though she had no logical reason to connect those feelings to a smell. Her tail began to wag. This was a sign of excitement that cubs were taught to control by the time they could walk. Had not wagged her tail in public since she was 4 cycles old. But here, alone in the corridor, watching these strange humans play with powder and make their laughing sounds, she could not help herself. She wanted to know what they were doing. She wanted to know what the powder was. She wanted to know why throwing things at each other made them so happy instead of angry. She wanted to understand this species that her mother called unpredictable and chaotic. Most of all, she wanted to make that laughing sound herself. The door to the room was just a few steps away. Could see that it was a standard station door, probably unlocked since this appeared to be a common recreation area. She could walk in. She could ask her questions. She could satisfy the curiosity that burned inside her like a small sun. But good cubs did not wander. Good cubs did not speak to strangers. Good cubs certainly did not enter human spaces without permission and supervision. Stood frozen in the corridor, caught between duty and desire. Her amber eyes reflected the scene inside the room. Her ears tracked every laugh and every word she could not quite hear. Her nose twitched at that wonderful, unknown smell. She should go back. She knew she should go back. But her paws had other ideas. Before she could stop herself, she was walking toward the door. Each step felt like a small rebellion against everything she had been taught. Each step brought her closer to the unknown. Each step made her heart beat faster with a mixture of fear and excitement. The door sensor detected her approach. A small light turned green. The door slid open and stepped into a new world. The moment stepped through the door, everything changed. The smell hit her first. It was even stronger inside the room, warm and sweet and somehow alive. It wrapped around her like a soft blanket and made her feel things she could not explain. Her nose twitched so fast that she worried it might fall off. Then the 2 humans noticed her. The male froze with his hand halfway to the bowl of white powder. The female lowered the soft round thing she had been pressing. They both turned to look at the small silver cub standing in their doorway. For a long moment nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Felt her courage melting away like ice in sunlight. She pressed herself against the doorframe, ready to run. Her mother was going to be so disappointed. There would be reports and apologies and possibly even an official diplomatic incident, all because she could not control her curiosity. But then the female human did something unexpected. She smiled. Not the polite smile that diplomats used in meetings, but a real smile that reached all the way to her eyes. It was warm and welcoming and contained no judgment at all. "Oh," the female said softly, "hello there, little one." Translator implant turned the words into perfect, But the device could not capture the gentleness in the human's voice. It was the voice mother used when woke from bad dreams. It was a voice that said she was safe. The male human crouched down slowly, making himself smaller and less threatening. White powder fell from his hair like snow. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to be afraid. We won't hurt you." His voice came out as barely a whisper. "Are you fighting?" The two humans looked at each other. Then they both made the laughing sound, but quietly this time, as if they were trying not to scare her away. "No, little friend," the male said. His eyes crinkled at the corners in that warm way had noticed before. "We're not fighting, we're baking." "Baking," repeated the word. Her translator offered several possible meanings, but none of them made sense in this context. "Making food," the female explained. She gestured at the messy counter behind her. "We take ingredients and mix them together and heat them up. Then we have something delicious to eat." His ears perked forward with interest. "You make your own food. You do not simply order it from the station's systems." "We could," the male said, "but there's something special about making food yourself. It tastes better when you put your own work into it." This was a strange concept, too. Among the food was simply fuel for the body. It was produced efficiently by automated systems and consumed without much thought. The idea of spending time and effort to create food manually seemed wasteful. But the smell in this room did not seem wasteful. It seemed wonderful. "What is that?" asked, pointing at the white powder that covered everything. "Is it dangerous?" The female cupped some of the powder in her palm and held it out toward. "This is flour. It comes from a plant called wheat that grows on our home planet. It's perfectly safe." Leaned forward slightly, her nose working overtime. The powder had a mild, pleasant smell. It looked soft and fine, like the sand on the beaches of Prime. "My name is," the female said, "and this is, what's your name, little one?" She answered before she could stop herself. She immediately felt embarrassed. Her mother would never approve of giving her name to strangers so easily. Repeated, making the name sound musical. "That's beautiful. Would you like to come closer and see what we're making?" Every lesson had ever learned screamed at her to refuse. Proper diplomatic conduct, careful interaction protocols, the importance of maintaining distance from unknown species. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, reminding her of all the reasons she should not be here. But Smile was so kind, and eyes were so gentle, and the room smelled so good. Took one small step forward, then another, then another. Before she knew it, she was standing right next to the counter, looking up at the strange scene before her. The soft round thing was apparently called dough. It was made by mixing flour with water and other ingredients. Showed her how to press it and fold it, explaining that this process was called kneading. "Why do you throw the flour at each other?" asked. This question had been burning in her mind since she first watched them through the window. Laughed again. The sound was so close now that could feel it vibrating in the air. "Because it's fun," he said simply. Fun, knew this word, but she was not sure she understood it fully. "You mean it gives you pleasure?" "More than that," said. She wiped some flour from her cheek, leaving a clean streak across her face. "It makes us happy. It makes us laugh. It helps us forget our worries and just enjoy the moment." "But it creates disorder," pointed out. "Look at this room. Everything is covered in powder. It will take significant effort to clean." "True," agreed. "But the cleaning is worth it for the joy we feel while making the mess." This was perhaps the most alien concept had ever encountered. The valued order above almost everything else. Their ships were spotless. Their cities were perfectly organized. The idea of deliberately creating chaos for emotional satisfaction was completely foreign to her culture. And yet, watching these two humans standing in their flower-covered room with their bright smiles and warm eyes, felt something shift inside her. Maybe the way was not the only way. Maybe there were other paths to happiness that her species had never considered. "Can I touch it?" she asked, gesturing at the dough. Of course, said. She guided small paw to the soft surface. Just press down like this. The dough was warm and yielding under his paw. It felt strange but pleasant. She pressed harder and the dough squished between her fingers. Some of it stuck to her fur. Oh no, said, pulling back in alarm. I've made a mess of myself. That's part of the experience, said. He sprinkled some flour over her paw. Here, this helps keep the dough from sticking too much. Everyone makes a mess their first time, even humans. Looked at her flour-covered paw. Silver fur turned white. Her mother would be horrified, but somehow did not feel horrified at all. She felt something warm and light bubbling up inside her chest. My mother says that messes are undignified, she said quietly, and exchanged a look that could not quite understand. It seemed to contain an entire conversation that happened without words. On Earth, said carefully, we believe that the best things in life are usually a little messy. Cooking, art, love, friendship. She smiled down at. Dignity is good for formal meetings, but kitchens are for joy. Considered this. It went against everything she had been taught. It contradicted the philosophy of order and control. It challenged the Galactic Council's assessment that humans were dangerously chaotic. But it also felt true in a way that could not explain. Standing here in this messy room with these kind strangers, she felt more alive than she had in months of proper behavior and careful protocol. She pressed her paws into the dough again. This time, she did not worry about the mess. She focused on the feeling of the warm surface under her pads. She watched hands move in smooth, practiced motions. She listened to humming a simple tune under his breath. And slowly, without realizing it, began to smile. It was not an expression. They did not smile like humans did. But somehow, in this strange moment, his mouth curved upward and her eyes brightened and she looked almost human herself. There you go, said gently. Now you're getting it. Did not know exactly what she was getting, but she knew that she never wanted to leave this room. Within minutes, found herself standing on a small step stool that had found in a storage cabinet. The stool brought her up to counter height, and now she could see everything the humans were doing up close. The counter was a battlefield of ingredients. There was the flour, of course, scattered everywhere like white sand after a storm. But there were also other things. Small containers held a clear liquid that called oil. A larger container held something called sugar, which sparkled like tiny crystals. There were eggs from earth birds, which looked strange and fragile in their smooth shells. And there was a warm brown substance called cinnamon that smelled like nothing had ever encountered before. We're making sweet bread, explained as she measured ingredients into a large bowl. It's a recipe from my grandmother. She used to make it every weekend when I was a child. Your grandmother taught you? Asked. On Prime, food preparation is done by automated systems. Cubs do not learn such skills. That's a shame, said. He was cracking eggs into a separate bowl with practiced ease. Some of my best memories are cooking with my family. My father taught me how to make soup when I was 5 years old. I still use his recipe. Tried to imagine her father teaching her to make food. The image would not form in her mind. Ambassador families did not do such things. They hired staff for manual tasks and focused their own energy on more important matters. But watching these humans work together, wondered if maybe her family had been missing something important. Here, said, pushing a small portion of dough toward. This one is yours. I'll show you what to do. Looked at the pale lump of dough. It sat on the floured counter like a small moon. It did not look like food. It looked like a blob of nothing special. First we knead it, demonstrated with her own portion. She pressed her palms into the dough, pushed forward, then folded the dough back onto itself. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. It's a rhythm, like a heartbeat. Imitated the motion. Her paws were smaller than human hands, and the dough seemed to have a mind of its own. It squished out between her fingers. It stuck to her fur. It refused to cooperate with her attempts to fold it properly. I'm doing it wrong, said, frustration creeping into her voice. You're doing fine, said. He sprinkled more flour over her workspace. Kneading takes practice. Nobody gets it perfect on their first try. On Prime, we are expected to achieve competence quickly, said. If a cub fails at a task multiple times, it is considered a sign of inadequate potential. The two humans exchanged another one of their wordless looks, was beginning to recognize this expression. It was the look they gave each other when she said something that surprised or concerned them. That sounds like a lot of pressure for a young person, said carefully. It is simply our way, replied. Excellence is the standard, failure is not acceptable. Well, said, in this kitchen, failure is not only acceptable, it's expected. I've been baking for 20 years and I still burn things sometimes. Last month I tried to make a cake for his birthday and it came out looking like a rock. It tasted like a rock too, added, and they both laughed. Did not understand. If you failed, why do you laugh about it? Because failure is part of learning, explained. Every mistake teaches us something, and sometimes the mistakes lead to better discoveries than the successes. She gestured at a tray of small round pastries cooling on the counter. These are cinnamon rolls. Do you know how they were invented? Someone was trying to make regular bread, but they accidentally added too much sugar and cinnamon. The bread was ruined, but the accident created something delicious. Looked at the cinnamon rolls. They did smell amazing. The idea that such a wonderful creation came from a mistake was fascinating to her. She returned her attention to her dough. This time, she did not worry so much about technique. She simply pushed and folded and turned, letting her paws find their own rhythm. The dough began to change under her touch. It became smoother and more elastic. It stopped sticking to her fur so much. That's it, encouraged. You're getting the feel for it. A small spark of pride ignited in his chest. She had never felt proud of making a mess before. She had never felt proud of doing something that her people would consider beneath her station. But here, in this flower-covered room, she felt like she had accomplished something meaningful. Began adding the cinnamon to the main batch of dough. The smell intensified, filling the room with warm sweetness. His nose twitched happily. Can you tell me about Earth? She asked as she continued kneading. What is it like? Oh, Earth is wonderful, said. Her eyes got a distant look, the way people's eyes did when they were remembering happy things. It has so many different places. Mountains covered in snow, deserts that go on forever, oceans so big you can't see the other side. And the food, added. Every region has its own special dishes. Where I come from, we have something called kimchi. It's vegetables that are prepared in a special way and left to develop flavor over time. And rice, said. We eat rice with almost everything. It's a grain like wheat but different. Tried to imagine a world where food was so important that entire cultures developed around it. They ate the same basic nutrition paste whether they were on the or a distant colony. The idea of regional specialties and family recipes was completely foreign. Do all humans cook? She asked. Not all, admitted. Some people prefer to let machines do it like your people, but many of us still enjoy making food ourselves. It's a way to show love to the people we care about. Love, knew this word, but it was not commonly used among the. Her people spoke of duty and obligation and family honor. Love was considered an emotional weakness. Yes, love, said. She stopped kneading and looked directly at. When I make food for someone, I'm giving them my time and effort. I'm saying that they matter to me, that I want to take care of them. That's what love is. Felt something strange happening in her chest. It was warm and tight and made her want to do something she couldn't identify. She looked down at her portion of dough, now smooth and properly kneaded. Is this bread going to be a gift for someone? She asked. It can be a gift for anyone who wants some, said, including you if you'd like to try it when it's done. His ears perked up. I would like that very much. She returned to her kneading with new enthusiasm. The dough felt different now. It wasn't just a learning exercise anymore. It was part of something that would become food, which would become a gift, which would become love. The concept was complicated and simple at the same time. Didn't fully understand it, but she wanted to understand it. She wanted to learn everything these strange, wonderful humans could teach her. A small cloud of flour puffed up from the counter as she pressed down too hard. It landed on her nose, coating the pink surface in white powder. Sneezed. The sound was small and cute and completely undignified. Laughed. It was not a mean laugh. It was a warm, friendly laugh that seemed to include her rather than make fun of her. And then something extraordinary happened. Felt that strange warmth in her chest expand. It rose up through her body like bubbles in water. It pushed at her throat. It demanded release. She opened her mouth, and a sound came out. It was not a purr. It was not a click. It was something completely new. Laughed. The sound surprised her so much that she stumbled backward on the step stool. She had never made that noise before. She had not even known she was capable of making it. But there it was, echoing in the flower-filled air. His face lit up with pure delight. Oh, that was beautiful. Touched her throat, amazed. What was that? That was laughter, said. His smile was so wide it seemed to take over his entire face. You laughed just like a human. But I'm not human, said confused. Maybe not, said gently. But maybe laughter doesn't belong to any one species. Maybe it belongs to everyone who feels joy. Considered this. She looked at her flour-covered paws. She looked at the dough she had kneaded. She looked at these two humans who had shown her more kindness in one afternoon than some showed in a lifetime. And she laughed again, just because she could. The sound of her own laughter startled so much that she jumped. Her small body twisted on the step stool. Her arms swung out to catch her balance, and her paw hit the large container of flour that was sitting at the edge of the counter. Time seemed to slow down as the container tipped, watched it fall with growing horror. She reached for it, but her paws were too slow. The container hit the floor with a dull thump, and then the world turned white. Flour exploded everywhere. It rose up in a massive cloud that filled the entire room. It covered the counter, the floor, the cooling racks, the oven. It coated and from head to toe. It settled on every surface like a fresh snowfall after a winter storm. When the cloud finally cleared, stood frozen on her step stool. Her silver fur was now completely white. Her amber eyes were wide with absolute terror. Her small body trembled. She had destroyed everything. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll clean it up. I'll replace the flour. Please don't tell my mother. Please don't file an incident report. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She couldn't finish the sentence. Her eyes were leaking water, which she knew was called crying when humans did it. She had never cried before. Cubs were trained to control their emotions from a very young age. Crying was considered a sign of weakness and poor breeding. But she couldn't stop. The tears flowed down her flour-covered cheeks, leaving clean trails in the white powder. Her whole body shook with fear and shame. Was at her side in an instant. She didn't care that she was covered in flour herself. She didn't care about the mess all around them. She simply gathered in her arms and held her gently. It's okay, said softly. It's okay, little one, it's just flour. Just flour, repeated between sobs. But look at this room. I've ruined everything. The bread, the cinnamon rolls, all your hard work. I've caused so much destruction. The cinnamon rolls are fine, said. He was on his knees scooping flour with his hands. His voice was calm and kind. They were already cooling, and the bread dough is safe in the bowl. Nothing important was damaged. But the mess, insisted. It will take so long to clean, and the flour is wasted, and I've embarrassed myself and you and my entire species and said firmly. She pulled back and looked the small cub directly in the eyes. Listen to me. This is not a disaster. This is not an embarrassment. This is just a mess, and messes can be cleaned. But my mother says. I know what your mother probably says, interrupted gently. But right now I'm saying something different, and right now in this room my rules apply. Okay. Sniffled, she wiped her nose with her flour-covered paw, which only made her face messier. Okay, she whispered. Stood up. He had a strange expression on his face. It was the look he'd had earlier, right before he threw flour at. His eyes sparkled with something that was beginning to recognize as mischief. He said slowly, I think we have a situation here. I see that, replied. Her voice had changed too. It was playful now, like she and were sharing a secret joke. There's only one solution to a situation like this. I completely agree. The flour is already everywhere. There's no point in being careful anymore. So we might as well. And then reached down to the floor, scooped up a handful of spilled flour, and threw it directly at its face. Gasped, but before she could process what was happening, grabbed her own handful and threw it back. The flour exploded in another white cloud, ducked, laughed, and threw more. Within seconds, the room had become a battlefield. Flour flew through the air like white rain, and were running around the counter, using it as cover while launching powdery attacks at each other. Their laughter filled the room, loud and joyful and completely uncontrolled. Stood on her step stool, watching in amazement. This was madness. This was chaos. This was everything her people warned against. This was wonderful. A handful of flour hit her in the chest. She looked down at the white splash mark on her already white fur. Then she looked up to see grinning at her. Well, he said, are you going to just stand there? Something shifted inside. The fear and shame that had been crushing her chest began to dissolve. In their place, something new was growing, something bright and wild and free. She jumped down from the step stool. She scooped flour from the floor with both paws. She threw it at with all her strength. It hit him square in the face. Erupted in laughter, sputtered and wiped his eyes, and felt that strange bubbling sensation rise up in her chest again. She laughed. She laughed so hard that she had to bend over. She laughed until her stomach hurt and her eyes leaked water and she could barely breathe. It was the most wonderful feeling she had ever experienced. The flour war continued for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Threw and dodged and laughed until she forgot everything else. She forgot about diplomatic protocols and proper behavior and her mother's expectations. She forgot about being a good cub and representing her species with dignity. She forgot about everything except this moment of pure, perfect joy. Eventually, they all collapsed on the flour-covered floor, exhausted and happy. Lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. Sat against the counter, catching her breath. Sprawled between them, her silver fur so covered in white that she looked like a different creature entirely. Couldn't find the right word. Her translator implant offered several options, but none of them were big enough. Fun, suggested. More than fun, said. It was like flying, like being completely free, like nothing else mattered except that moment. That's what play is supposed to feel like, said. Humans need play. We need moments where we can forget our responsibilities and just enjoy being alive. Do all humans do this? Asked. Throw flour at each other. Not everyone throws flour specifically, said with a smile. But everyone plays in some way. Games, sports, art, music. We have thousands of ways to be joyful. Sat up slowly. She looked around the room. It was an absolute disaster. Flour covered every surface. The floor was slippery with powder. Their footprints and handprints made patterns everywhere like strange art. Her mother would be horrified. The station cleaning crew would probably file a complaint. Someone might even demand an investigation into what had happened here. But didn't care. For the first time in her life, she had experienced pure happiness. She had played without worrying about results. She had made a mess without feeling ashamed. She had laughed and thrown things and acted completely undignified. And she felt more alive than ever before. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Both of you, thank you for showing me this." "You don't need to thank us," said. "You did this yourself. All we did was give you permission." "Permission to make mistakes," added. "Permission to be messy. Permission to be a child." Looked at her flower-covered paws. "My mother is going to be very upset." "Probably," admitted. "But maybe she'll understand when you explain why this happened." Wasn't sure about that. Ambassador was not known for understanding things like flower wars and spontaneous play, but that was a problem for later. Right now, in this moment, was happy. And then the door slid open. Turned to look and her heart stopped. 3 figures stood in the doorway. Station commander, a security officer in full uniform, and ambassador's mother wearing her most formal diplomatic robes. They stared at the scene before them, the flower everywhere, the 2 humans covered in white, the cub who looked like a ghost. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Waited for the world to end. Ambassador stood in the doorway like a statue carved from stone. Her formal diplomatic robes were deep blue with silver threading, completely untouched by the chaos before her. Her posture was perfect. Her expression was unreadable. Only her ears gave any sign of emotion, pressed flat against her skull in what recognized as extreme distress. The silence stretched on forever. Could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her chest. She could feel the flower drying on her fur, making her skin itch. She could sense and beside her, tense and waiting. "Ambassador," station commander said carefully, "I apologize for any inconvenience this may have." "What?" interrupted, her voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, "is on my daughter's nose." Reached up and touched her face. Her paw came away white with flour, more flour than she had realized. She must look ridiculous. "It's flour, mother," she said. Her voice trembled but did not break. "From wheat, from earth. The humans were teaching me to make bread." His eyes moved slowly across the room. She took in the flour-covered walls, the messy counter, the abandoned dough, the scattered ingredients. She looked at and, standing there in their white-dusted clothes with expressions of mixed worry and defiance. "Teaching you to make bread," repeated flatly. "Yes, mother. And this," gestured at the chaos around them, "this is part of the bread-making process." Stepped forward. Her chin was lifted and her voice was steady. "Ambassador, please don't blame for any of this. She was curious and we should have sent her back to your quarters immediately. We should have contacted you. The fault is entirely ours." "We invited her in," added. "We taught her. We threw flour at her. If anyone should face consequences, it's us." Looked at them in surprise. They were taking responsibility for her actions. They were trying to protect her, even though they barely knew her. This was not something that happened in culture. Among her people, everyone was responsible for their own behavior. Nobody shielded others from deserved punishment. But here were 2 humans, ready to accept blame they did not deserve, simply because they wanted to protect a small alien cub they had just met. Something in his chest swelled, with emotion she could not name. "Mother," she said, finding courage she did not know she possessed, "they didn't do anything wrong. They were kind to me. They showed me things I've never seen before, and I—" She hesitated, then continued, "I don't regret any of it." His eyes widened slightly. Had never spoken to her mother like this before. She had always been obedient, agreeable, perfectly behaved. "You don't regret this?" asked, her voice strange. "No, mother, I learned how to make dough. I learned about human culture. I learned that messes can be cleaned and that mistakes can lead to wonderful discoveries." Took a deep breath. "And I laughed, mother. I laughed for the first time in my life." The silence that followed was different from before. It was not tense or angry. It was thoughtful, contemplative. Studied her daughter for a long moment. Then her eyes moved to and Then they swept across the flower-covered room one more time. And then Ambassador, one of the most respected diplomats in the entire Galactic Council, did something that shocked everyone present, including herself. She laughed. It was not a human laugh. It was smaller, softer, almost like a purr, but not quite. It seemed pulled from somewhere deep inside her against her will. She covered her muzzle with her paw immediately, her ears flattening with embarrassment. "Forgive me," she said, trying to compose herself. "I haven't made that sound since I was a cub myself. I had forgotten that I could." Stared at her mother in amazement. In all her 6 cycles of life, she had never heard laugh. She had never seen her mother behave with anything less than perfect dignity. The continued slowly, her voice thoughtful now, "Believe that order is the foundation of civilization. We believe that chaos leads to destruction. We believe that play is for children and should be abandoned when one reaches maturity." She paused, looking at the flower on the floor. "But perhaps we have forgotten something important along the way." She stepped into the room. Her pristine diplomatic robes immediately began catching flour from the air. White powder settled on the blue fabric like stars appearing at dusk, did not brush it away. "Show me," she said quietly, "how to make bread." Thought her heart might explode from happiness. The next hour was the most wonderful of young life. She watched as her mother, the great ambassador, learned to knead dough under patient guidance. She watched explain the chemistry of baking while listened with genuine interest. She watched her mother's perfectly groomed fur become streaked with flour and oil. At one point, accidentally knocked over the sugar container. Instead of apologizing profusely, she paused, looked at the sparkling mess on the counter, and let out another small laugh. "I see why this is enjoyable," she admitted. Commander had remained in the doorway, watching the scene with barely concealed amusement. The security officer looked completely lost, clearly unsure whether to file a report or simply pretend none of this was happening. Eventually, the bread was ready for the oven. Placed the shaped loaves on a baking tray and slid them into the heating chamber. The room immediately filled with that warm, sweet smell that had first drawn from her quarters. "Now we wait," said, "about 30 minutes, then we'll have fresh bread." The 4 of them sat together on the flour-covered floor. And humans, ambassador and bakers, all equally messy and tired and somehow content. "I must apologize," said after a while. "I have spent my career warning about humans. I told her you were unpredictable and chaotic and potentially dangerous. I was wrong." "Well," said with a smile, "we are unpredictable and chaotic. You weren't completely wrong about that." "But the chaos is not dangerous," replied. "It is liberating. I had forgotten what it felt like to act without considering political consequences, to make a mess without worrying about what others would think." "That's what kitchens are for," said. "Kitchens are sacred spaces. In a kitchen you can be yourself." Considered this, perhaps the need more kitchens. Laughed. It came easily now, naturally, like she had been doing it her whole life. When the bread finally emerged from the oven, it was golden and beautiful. The crust was crispy and the inside was soft and warm. Cut it into slices and passed them around. Took her first bite and felt something like wonder spread through her whole body. The bread was delicious. It was possibly the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. But more than that, it was the taste of her own effort, her own learning, her own joy made physical. "On Earth," said as they ate, "we call this breaking bread. When people share food they've made together, it creates a bond between them. It says that we trust each other, we care for each other, we are willing to share what we have." Took a bite of bread. She chewed slowly, thoughtfully. "They have no such tradition. We eat to fuel our bodies, nothing more." "Maybe that could change," suggested gently. Looked at her daughter. Was covered in flour from ears to tail. Her amber eyes were bright with happiness. Her mouth was full of bread and she was making small sounds of pleasure as she chewed. This was not the proper, dignified cub that had raised. This was something new, something different, something better, perhaps. Yes, said quietly, perhaps it could. They finished the bread together as the station continued its slow rotation around the distant star. Commander eventually joined them, accepting a slice with a grin. Even the security officer took a hesitant bite and admitted it was acceptable. Later, much later, after the room had been cleaned and apologies had been formally offered and accepted, sat with her mother in their quarters. Both of them had bathed, but traces of flour still clung to their fur in places. "I'm sorry for disobeying you, Mother," said. Was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and pulled close. "I'm sorry for giving you orders that needed to be disobeyed. I was trying to protect you from the unknown. Instead, I was keeping you from growing. Will you be in trouble with the council? Perhaps some will think this incident was undignified," smiled, a real smile that looked strange and wonderful on her usually serious face. "But others might understand. The galaxy is so worried about what makes species different. Perhaps we should spend more time discovering what makes us the same." Thought about in. She thought about flour and laughter and bread that tasted like love. She thought about her mother, laughing for the first time in decades. "Mother," she said, "can we learn more human recipes?" Laughed again. It came easier this time, more natural. "Yes, my little one, I think we can." Years later, would become the first cultural liaison to Earth. She specialized in what humans called comfort food, the dishes that brought joy and made messes and forced people to sit together and share. She kept a small container of flour in her office on the. Visitors often asked about it. "A reminder," she would say, "that the best things in life are usually a little messy." And then she would invite them to bake bread. Because some lessons once learned should never be forgotten, and some doors once opened should never be closed again. In the vast, orderly galaxy of the Galactic Council, a small revolution had begun. It started with a curious cub, two kind humans, and a room covered in flour and laughter. It would change everything. But that is a story for another time.